She looked at him with the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. Not cold, not angry, but hollow, like the soul of the relationship had already packed its bags while the body stayed behind out of politeness. 3 weeks ago, she leaned into his shoulder, fingers tracing the fabric of his shirt like it was made of something sacred. Eyes filled with that soft warmth men chase their entire lives. And now she sat across from him like she was slowly erasing the memory of wanting him at all. And the tragedy wasn't in her silence, but in his confusion, because in his mind, he'd done everything right. The good morning texts, the reliable presence, the nice dinners, the soft reassurances, and still, somewhere between comfort and routine, something essential had died, something invisible but vital. And it's in that blindness, that silent erosion of polarity, that the modern man is being eaten alive without ever realizing it, especially older men dating younger women, because the danger isn't in obvious disrespect or loud mistakes. It's in the subtle habits, the silent compromises, the soft betrayals of masculine energy that go unnoticed, not by her but by him. And when a man loses that internal compass, when he forgets the quiet power of mystery, tension, and emotional gravity, she doesn't yell, she doesn't scream, she fades. And no dating coach in the world will tell you that the problem was that you became too safe, too available, too easy to understand, too emotionally accommodating, because none of those sound like flaws in theory, but to a woman craving polarity, the slow death of attraction often comes in the form of comfort mistaken for connection, and that's where the first silent habit begins. The habit of over-explaining your intentions, of constantly verbalizing your emotions, of turning your masculine presence into a therapy session she never signed up for, because while women love depth, they are not drawn to emotional dependence disguised as vulnerability. And when a man feels the need to always check in, always clarify, always explain where he stands, he loses the mystery that once made him magnetic, and in trying to prove that he's emotionally safe, he becomes emotionally predictable, and predictability is the slow poison of seduction, especially for younger women drawn to the unknown, the unspoken, the emotional gravity that doesn't need constant affirmation. Because the truth is, attraction lives in the space between certainty and mystery. Too much of either kills the spark. And when a man over-explains, over-justifies, or over-analyzes his place in a woman's life, he's unknowingly telling her, "You are the center of my emotional world." And while that sounds romantic in theory, in practice, it screams weakness, because masculine energy isn't about emotional chaos. It's about stillness, the kind of emotional restraint that says, "I feel everything, but I don't need to perform any of it." And that restraint creates the polarity women crave but can't articulate. And it's what separates a man she respects from a man she comforts. And when you become the latter, you become disposable. And that leads us into the second silent habit, the death of sexual tension through habitual politeness. Because somewhere along the way, modern men were taught that being overly respectful, overly accommodating, and never rocking the boat would make them more attractive. But what it actually does is neuter the very energy that created desire in the first place, because you cannot seduce a woman with manners, you can't build arousal through obedience, and you sure as hell can't trigger deep feminine craving through passive politeness. And yet, that's exactly what most older men do when trying to date younger women. They filter every move, second-guess every compliment, and suppress every natural instinct out of fear of offending, not realizing that in trying to be good, they've become forgettable, because desire is not born in safety. It's born in emotional risk, and when you remove that risk entirely, when you dull your edges and bury your intensity beneath nice behavior, she may appreciate your company, but she will never ache for you. And that is the difference between being seen as mature and being seen as a man. Because true masculine maturity isn't about removing your fire. It's about learning to control it without extinguishing it. And when you forget that, when you dull yourself to be more digestible, you don't make her feel safe. You make her feel numb, and numbness is what kills attraction faster than anything else, which leads us into the third silent habit, becoming emotionally reactive to her pullbacks, because every woman, no matter how into you she is, will test the emotional waters by pulling away from time to time, and it's not always conscious. But it's always revealing, because how a man responds to emotional distance says more about his masculinity than how he behaves during intimacy. And most men fail this test, especially older men who confuse emotional availability with emotional neediness, because the moment she texts a little less, takes a little longer to reply, or suddenly becomes colder, they panic, they chase, they start sending long texts, asking what's wrong, trying to fix a problem that hasn't even fully revealed itself. And what they don't realize is that this behavior, though rooted in good intentions, destroys attraction, because the moment you show that your emotional stability depends on her consistency, you become emotionally dependent. And dependence is not masculine, it's maternal. And she's not looking to mother you, she's looking to feel your weight, your calm, your certainty, even when she's uncertain. And if you fail that test, she may not leave immediately, but her heart will start closing without you noticing. And once a woman starts emotionally detaching, it's nearly impossible to bring her back through logic or affection, because what she's responding to isn't what you said or did. It's who you revealed yourself to be under pressure, and pressure is the ultimate revealer of polarity, which brings us to the fourth silent habit, the surrender of your lifestyle to accommodate hers. And this one is especially dangerous for older men who feel the need to prove value to younger women, because they often overcorrect by becoming too available, rearranging their schedules, sacrificing hobbies, routines, even friendships, in order to make it work. But what they don't realize is that every time they bend their life around her, they are sending a message that her world matters more than theirs. And while that sounds romantic in the short term, it creates a long-term imbalance of power. And power, whether people like to admit it or not, plays a massive role in attraction, especially in masculine-feminine dynamics. Because if your life becomes orbiting her life, she loses the gravitational pull that once made her revolve around you. And it's not about dominance or control. It's about emotional leadership, about being a man whose life is so rich, so grounded, so intentional, that she feels lucky to be invited into it, not burdened by carrying the emotional weight of steering the relationship herself, because the fifth silent habit is just that, putting her in the position of emotional leadership. And this is something most men don't even realize they're doing until it's too late, because it starts subtly, letting her plan every date, decide every emotional direction, initiate every moment of intimacy. And slowly but surely, she becomes the one guiding the rhythm of the relationship, while he becomes the passenger. And that dynamic works until it doesn't, because the feminine craves to be led emotionally, not just logistically. And when a man gives up that role, he becomes passive, and passivity in a man creates emotional burden in a woman. And emotional burden will always kill attraction faster than physical disinterest ever could, which brings us to the sixth silent habit, the loss of edge, the quiet abandonment of your masculine polarity. And this is one of the most painful to watch, because it doesn't happen all at once. It happens through 1,000 tiny compromises, the slow erosion of boundaries, the swallowing of opinions to avoid arguments, the pretending to agree to avoid tension, and what starts as peacekeeping turns into self-erasure, and eventually the man becomes unrecognizable even to himself. And here's the truth no one tells you. Women do not want a man who agrees with everything they say. They want a man who makes them feel something, a man who challenges them, expands them, brings fire to their softness. And if you sacrifice that tension to become more agreeable, You will kill her attraction without her even realizing why. Because attraction isn't logical, it's primal, and primal attraction needs friction, polarity, and emotional edge. And when you lose that edge, you lose her heart, which brings us to the final silent habit, the fear of walking away. And this is perhaps the most destructive of all, because once a man becomes afraid of losing a woman, he begins making decisions based on fear, not power. And every time you act out of fear, fear of upsetting her, fear of being alone, fear of not being enough, you diminish your masculine core, and she feels it, even if she can't articulate it. Because masculine energy is about freedom, about choice, about knowing that no matter how beautiful she is, no matter how deeply you care, you will never beg, chase, or sacrifice your self-respect to keep someone who doesn't see your value. And when a man truly lives from that place, not performatively, but internally, he becomes the kind of man women never want to lose, not because he's perfect, but because his presence is rare, grounded, and unwavering. And in a world of men who compromise their soul for temporary attention, that kind of presence becomes unforgettable. So if you're wondering why she pulled away, why she stopped texting first, why she no longer looks at you with that softness in her eyes, the answer isn't in what you did last week. It's in who you've slowly become over time. And if you want to reclaim that spark, that gravity, that sense of emotional dominance without saying a word, you don't need to chase her. You need to return to yourself, because the truth is, the world should be perfection, not because it is, but because the man who moves through it is unshaken, unhurried, and unapologetically grounded in who he is. And that, above all else, is the kind of man she was searching for all along. Not a savior, not a simp, not a slave to her moods, but a man who is home within himself. And that is the one thing that no silent habit can ever destroy.